address your questions as best as we can.
You're going to bring up the others. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good morning. This is Dennis Falloon, and I am the District 7 Academy Coordinator and a District 7 consultant. And I'd like to welcome you to the 5th District 7 Safety Academy webinar for the second series. This is the second time that we've had the safety topics. And today we'll be designing and operating intersections for safety, and that will be presented by Larry Hagan, a professional engineer and also a District 7 safety consultant. And after today, we have 7 topics remaining until the end of the year. I'd like to go through my brief little intro that I usually present every webinar, just to kind of keep you informed about things. Naturally, this is the District 7 Local Agency Traffic Safety Academy. These webinars provide information regarding safety-related issues to enhance your local safety programs. The series began on March 19th, 2014, and they run between 10 and 12. They will end in December 10th, 2014. They are a minimum of 1 hour, but no more than 2 hours. And to register, you would go to this link for SurveyMonkey. And if you want to go to the web page that Anthony was showing you, this is the link to that, www.tampabaytrafficsafety.com. And if you want to see the recordings, you would also go to tampabaytrafficsafety.com of the previous webinars. This is the list of the webinars, and today we are covering the designing and operating intersections for safety. And then I would also like to highlight that there are PDHs for Florida's PEs available. You have to download the form and complete it and mail it to Larry Hagan. This is his address there, or you can fax it to him. And this form is out on the web page link. And also, here's the link highlighted for you also, so you can see it. The latest Safety Academy news is the AICP hours credits are still being worked on, and they are supposedly you can still get credit for the ones you previously saw this year. So once we get that into place, we'll make that available to you. Wanted to also mention that the 3rd series of safety topics are currently being developed, and will begin in January 2015 and will run through December 2015, and there will only be 12 topics, 1 per month. And if you have any suggestions on topics that we have not covered, please email them to me. And if you have any suggestions on maybe revisiting a topic that we may have presented in the first session and now currently in the second session, you think we should revisit it, also let me know by email. And lastly here's my contact information. And if you ever need any assistance with anything related to the webinar or have any questions, please feel free to call me, and definitely you can get a hold of Anthony Chamont too. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Larry Hagan. Larry?
All right, good morning, everyone. Let me get my presentation started here. All right, well, welcome to Designing and Operating Intersections for Safety. This actually, the title came from Federal Highway Administration training course. My good friend Jack Freeman and I did this training course several times. It's a 2-day training course. We're not going to go through 2 days of training on the webinar, so relax. It's not going to be that long. And I've actually tailored a lot of the stuff. It's a lot different from the 2-day training course. But what we want to talk about is designing and operating intersections for safety. But first, I want to give you my disclaimer. Certainly, you're not going to get all the information you need to design or operate intersections in just a 1-hour webinar. And any of the information that you see here, hopefully it's helpful to you, but it's fully at your discretion to use it appropriately. So that's my disclaimer, and I'm sticking to it. But let's look at, can we design a safe intersection? Can we design an intersection that is completely safe? And of course the answer to that is no. We can't really design a safe intersection, and the reason is an intersection by definition is a place of conflict, a place where there's intersecting traffic streams. That's what an intersection is. So you will have conflicts at an intersection. They should be expected. Any intersection type, whether it's a signalized intersection, unsignalized, or a roundabout, whatever, there's going to be conflicts. But our role as traffic engineers, transportation professionals, is to mitigate those conflicts, minimize them to the best of our abilities. That's what we're after. And so that's what we're going to look at today. How can we improve the way that we design and operate intersections to make them as safe as we reasonably can? Like I said, an intersection is a place where 2 or more roadways cross or join. It's a place where there will be conflicts. You're trying to concentrate your conflicts in this organized location, organized place, so that you can manage them and again mitigate them. And like I said, and what AASHTO tells us, our objective is to reduce the severity of potential conflicts between all the intersection users, motor vehicles, buses, trucks, bicycles, pedestrians, whatever, whoever may be using the intersection. We want to minimize the conflicts and reduce the severity of those potential conflicts. Are intersection crashes a problem in Florida? That's also an interesting question. This slide here, this is from, I believe, 2006 FARS data, and it's something I was using in a lot of presentations I was doing around the state. At the time, I was doing a lot of stuff for the technology transfer program at the University of Florida as a safety circuit rider. And again, this is from the 2006, I believe, FARS data, the Fatal Accident Recording System national data. And this map shows intersection-related crash fatalities. And you can see Florida has, this is 1,006 down here, 1,006 fatalities, intersection crash-related fatalities in Florida in that recording year. Our closest competitor is California with 851, followed by number 3, Texas, 716. And then if you look at the rest of the states, nobody else is even close. Nobody else even in the ballpark. So Florida was number 1. We were way out there, number 1 in intersection crash-related fatalities. Certainly a place where the state of Florida does not want to be number 1 is intersection crash-related fatalities. Well, in response to these numbers and all the intersection crashes and the fatalities at intersections that Florida was having, the Central Office of Florida DOT, Mark Wilson's Office in Traffic Operations, and the State Safety Office contacted the Federal Highway Administration and said, hey, could y'all come do a, they called it a reverse scanning tour of some of our intersections. And so they brought in a lot of experts from Federal Highways, and they went around to lots of different intersections around the state of Florida to look at the intersections. What are we doing well, and what things do we need to improve? And so they came up with some suggestions for some improvements, and a lot of the design standards and design guidance out of traffic operations and out of the roadway design office in the past several years has been in response to that. And so one of the things that has happened is Florida has done a good job, and the numbers have come down substantially. This is the 2010 data, and so between what we saw in 2006 there and 2010, the number came down from just over 1,000 to under 800. So I mean, that's a 20% drop in just a few years. So that's very significant. That's a excellent right path to be on. A significant improvement in intersection crash-related fatalities. But still, In 2010, Florida's number one, 789. California still number two at 725. Texas still number three at 614. And like I said, none of the other states are anywhere in the ballpark of these three states. And so Florida way out ahead, way out ahead of everybody else, not where we want to be. And California and Texas, somewhat on our heels. So again, that's 2010 data. 2011, Florida dropped to number two. Woohoo! Improvement. So yeah, no longer number one, number two. And so, but you can see California was now number one at 716. Florida, though, right on the heels at 714. And so, again, Florida headed in the right direction, reducing intersection crash-related fatalities, but still, that's a big number, and we have a lot of work still ahead of us. You can see that's a little bit less than a third of the total fatalities in Florida are at intersections, and so, again, there's some things we need to concentrate on, work on to make it a little bit better. Unfortunately, the 2012 FARS data is now out on the website. They're a couple years behind, but in the 2012 data, which was just posted in 2014, they didn't break out intersection fatalities. So I'm not sure where the more current data is. They just didn't break out intersection fatalities. But this is the latest information I can find on FARS is Florida is no longer number one, we're number two. And so, again, we're headed in the right direction from 2006 to 2011, gone from, again, over 1,000 to now just over 700. So we're headed in the right direction. Again, we're now implementing all those changes that the feds had suggested. And so hopefully we are going to see that number continue to drop, continue to come down. So in answer to the question, are intersection crashes a problem for Florida? I hope everyone is going to agree. The answer to that would be yes, that it is a problem and something we need to continue to work on, continue to have our eyes on, our attention on. And so hopefully some of the information in this webinar will be helpful as we try to make our intersections safer, operate them safely, and design them safely. Intersections come in all shapes and sizes. This is a suburban intersection. You can see 3 right turn lanes, triple right turns, 1 lane for the throughs and the lefts. So you can see where the majority of traffic is going in this suburban situation here, headed towards, I guess, the population center, the business center, if you will, of this area. This is a very urbanized intersection here, lots of pedestrian space, and so you have very highly urbanized intersection here. This is a low-volume rural intersection, stop-controlled low-volume rural intersection. And we'll be talking some more about this kind of intersection as well because, intersections, like I say, come in all shapes and sizes. Here's one in the Tampa Bay area, Dale Mabry at Bears Avenue. Again, urbanized or actually suburban type setting. A lot of traffic there. A lot of traffic in all directions, busy commercial activity and that kind of stuff in that vicinity. So we're going to be looking at intersections of various shapes and sizes and some of the considerations as we think about designing and operating intersections. Well, who are the users of the intersections? Well, certainly for the state road system and especially the strategic intermodal system, we have to be thinking about trucks and cars because in addition to moving people around, pedestrians and bicyclists and other things, we are also moving goods, getting the goods to market. Shipping is an important part of our roadway system need as well. And so for some roadways, the truck is an appropriate design vehicle. For many other roadways, the truck is not an appropriate design vehicle. And again, so for certainly anything on the strategic intermodal system where you're moving freight and moving people and freight long distances and trying to move them fairly rapidly, a truck is an appropriate design vehicle. When we get to more local roads, and this is the local agency Traffic Safety Academy for many of the cities and counties, many of your local roads probably don't carry as much freight. And so is the truck an appropriate design vehicle? In many cases, that answer is going to be no. Certainly for a residential roadway where everything that is on that residential roadway is single-family homes or something like that, a big truck like this is probably not the best design vehicle. Occasionally, you have a moving truck come in, but that's only going to be like once or twice or a couple times a year. You really don't need to be designing explicitly for that as a common occurrence. Certainly you may have trash pickup vehicles or school buses and those kind of things, and so that might be a more appropriate design vehicle for that scale of roadway. So again, we need to tailor our design to who are the real users that are going to be using that roadway. And again, different design vehicles for different classes of roadway or different types of roadways. Some of the other users we need to think about will be our older drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit vehicles. And really interesting, I was doing some training classes a couple years ago for the central office on their Safe Mobility for Life program. And one of the things I was not aware of until I started doing those training classes is the real magnitude of some of the older driver issues that we have to deal with in Florida. I mean, everyone knows that we're somewhere around 20% or closing in on 20% of our population is over 65. But I was really shocked back when I was teaching that class to find out how many licensed drivers there were over the age of 100 in the state of Florida. I mean, the number is huge. I looked up the statistics this morning. They no longer break it down over 100, but 2014 statistics from Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, there are over 71,000 licensed drivers over the age of 90 in Florida. Over 71,000 90-plus drivers in Florida. Now, not all of those people may drive. They may just have their driver's license as their picture ID. And so not all of those 71,000 people over the age of 90 may be actually driving on the roadways, but some of them are. And so, I mean, it's something we need to be thinking about and be aware of as we, again, are thinking about operating our intersections for safety, operating our intersections as safe as we can for the users that are out there. So we're going to look at these different user groups as well and how they relate to how we design and operate our intersections. The elder road users, again, there's been a lot of emphasis from the central office on accommodating the elder road users. It is something really important. Here's a few statistics. Just, from a national perspective, the total population over the age of 65 increased by 20%. However, driver fatalities in that 2003 to 2012 time frame by 15%. That's good news. However, motorcyclist fatalities increased by 201%. That means basically it tripled. 200% increase means that it essentially tripled. So most motorcycle fatalities among the elder road users are on the rise, and also we see bicycle fatalities on the increase among the older road users. I've seen many crash reports where an elderly person is moved down to Florida, they're retired, they buy themselves a Harley, and then they get out on the roadway and then get into a real bad situation and are not able to survive the crash. And so it is something we need to be aware of and need to incorporate all the E's, engineering, education, enforcement, and EMS to address those things the best we can. A very comprehensive approach to safety is what we need when dealing with some of these issues. Now, certainly one of the things that I want to make clear, age alone is not an indicator of your ability to drive or ability not to drive. Many people, if they're very active and watch their health and take care of themselves, are able to drive well into their 80s and 90s safely. But it is a fact that as we all age, we do start to lose some of our abilities in these areas. Fortunately, many of the elder drivers do limit their driving to daylight hours. It is a fact, as we all age, we need more light hitting our eyes in order to really see and perceive things. I mean, that's just a physiological fact. And so as we all age, our eyesight will diminish, our hearing will diminish, our reaction time will diminish, and all these things will diminish as we age. Again, some people are able to compensate for those things, and some people, by taking care of themselves, and, are able to really drive well into their later years. But again, what we need to do as people designing and operating the roadway system is be designing and thinking about, not the 50th percentile driver, the average driver, but the 85th percentile driver. And since we have, well over 15% elderly population in Florida, the 85th percentile driver in Florida is going to be somebody that has some diminished eyesight, diminished hearing, and diminished reaction time characteristics. Elder drivers also, again, just you lose focus, or your ability to focus on all the different things going on around you, and so that's another thing that comes with age. And so when you look at fatal crashes, you look at serious injury crashes, some of the things you do tend to see, failure to yield right-of-way type crashes, are the elder population is a little overrepresented in some of those types of crashes. And so specifically some of the things we see over and over, if we have left turn gap acceptance across multiple lanes of traffic, that again, elderly people tend to be overrepresented in left turn crashes, in the left turn crash statistics. So again, it's something, again, as we design and operate our intersections, something we need to be thinking about. If we have a higher percentage of elderly drivers in our area, we may need to really think about, do we want them making permitted left turns across 3 or 4 lanes of oncoming traffic? The answer may be no, but it's something, it's an issue we need to be thinking about as designers or agencies that operate intersections. Some of the treatments, when Florida DOT many years ago first started the Elder Road User Program, they did a lot of focus group surveys. Some of the things that the elder road users replied back were not too surprising. One of the things that the older or elder road user community just loved was the fact that Florida DOT went from the 4-inch markings to 6-inch markings. I mean, they just loved that. Thought that was one of the greatest things in the world. Thank you so much for doing that, Florida DOT. And it's been a real boon, I think, to traffic safety in Florida. When you drive around the country, drive into other states that are still using 4-inch markings for their lane lines, they just look so minuscule. They look so small. And as a driver, you say, gosh, you just put that little thin pencil line down on the roadway. When you see the wide markings that Florida has now standardized on, again, it's a benefit to the elder road users, really a benefit to all the road users. It really helps all the people that are out there. But some of the other things, overhead indications for turn lanes, overhead signing for turn lanes, one signal for each lane, one signal face for each lane. These kind of things certainly beneficial to the elder road user who has some of those diminishing issues that we talked about, but really beneficial for all the road users. So these are some of the treatments at intersections. Some other things, street lighting. Like I said, as we age, all of us, you need more light to really see and perceive things. If you've ever had your parents or your grandparents come to your house, I mean, I've heard it many times, and I'm sure many of you have too. Gosh, this room's so dark. And if you're, if you're fairly young, you say, gosh, I can see just fine. But someone that's getting up into their 60s or 70s comes into that same room, and they need a lot more light to really be able to see what's going on. And so same thing out in the roadway environment. We need better street lighting if we're going to be accommodating our elder road users. And so we need to have, good lighting and real good, strong lighting standards. Some of the other things we need to do to accommodate our elder road users, accommodate them at the signals, make sure the crosswalk markings are bright and clear, and if we can do things like narrowing the crossing so they're not exposed as much out in the roadway, makes it much safer and much easier for the elder road user to cross the road. One of the things in the MUTCD, if you do have a substantial amount of your population that might be operating slower than 3.5 feet per second, you're certainly justified to use a slower crossing time. And so just some of the things that we need to think about, again, designing and operating intersections, make sure we're accommodating the people that are out there wanting to use our intersections. So we're going to switch now and talk about pedestrians. This is a pedestrian crossing road. This is a road, I was doing a pedestrian road safety audit a few weeks ago in the Jacksonville area, and this elderly gentleman came out there with his walker, and he's crossing the road, and just watched him cross the road, and he made it across just barely before the intersection ended the flashing don't walk. So again, he made it right at the end of the flashing don't walk. He got a good start here while the walk was on, you can see, but again, it took him a while to get to the other side, and there wasn't much spare. So again, we need to really be thinking about the pedestrians that we accommodate. Like intersections, pedestrians come in all shapes and sizes. You have able-bodied pedestrians, people that are very mobile and get around real well. Children are also an important factor to consider when we're talking about pedestrian design. Especially if you're near a school, that's what Safe Routes to School was all about, making sure that there were safe routes to the school. And so they are one element of the design we need to be thinking about for pedestrians. We talked about the elderly. They're certainly some of the pedestrians we need to accommodate, but also we need to be thinking about those that are mobility impaired, may have some additional challenges getting around, and so we put in the ramps and other things like that. But let's not also forget those that are visually impaired. That's why we put in the detectable warning surfaces so that they can sense, this is where I'm supposed to go. This is where I'm supposed to cross the road. Some of the common pedestrian treatments: median refuge islands, curb extensions, curb ramps, detectable warning surfaces, accessible pedestrian signals. I'll talk about that a little bit. I mentioned lighting, again, especially because we have so many such a significant portion of our population over the age of 65, elderly population, our elder road users. Highway lighting at intersections is something very, very important, and certainly from the Secretary in Tallahassee all the way down now, lighting at intersections is something DOT is very committed to, and all the agencies should be thinking about lighting at our signalized intersections for sure. DOT has been, for the last several years, or especially District 7, DOT has been one of the leaders in doing high visibility crosswalks, making the crosswalks very enhanced and lighting them up so that people can really see them, having the appropriate signing. Most of the crossings now are using the fluorescent yellow-green signs, again, to really make them more visible, to make them stand out and say, hey, this is where you should expect a pedestrian. Some of the uncontrolled intersection treatments, again, in the Tampa Bay area with the rectangular rapid flash beacons, the RRFBs, we're leading the nation, I think, in some of the good treatments that we're trying at uncontrolled intersections. Again, still a lot of territory we need to cover, still a lot of improvements we need to make, but we're doing a lot of good things and we need to keep doing them. I mentioned accessible pedestrian signals. It's really fascinating. Years ago, I was a signal system engineer for a very large county, and we got requests a lot of times for these accessible pedestrian signals, the audible signals that would give audible tones when a sight-impaired person wanted to cross the road. And what we did, I think this is a pretty good policy for most local agencies, is what we did as a maintaining agency. We recommended go to the Lighthouse for the Blind, work with them, because the first thing we wanted to make sure before we put out a device is that the person that wanted that device, they understood the sounds they were going to get. There's many different types of audible pedestrian things out there, but the ones we were using at that time used different bird chirp sounds. And so we wanted to make sure that the user understood the sounds they were hearing and knew what was the appropriate sound and what was the appropriate response when you heard a certain sound. And so I would recommend for any agency that is looking at installing accessible PED signals, you have a similar type process. You may need to tweak it for whatever things your agency has going on. But that worked for us in that, we would work with the Lighthouse for the Blind. We would ask the person to go coordinate with them. The sight-impaired person would receive training, and then the Lighthouse for the Blind would send a letter to the county saying, we've worked with this person. Can you please install the accessible pedestrian signals at this location? And we go out and install it. And so it's the accessible pedestrian signals. One of the things that you have to be aware of, anytime somebody goes out and pushes the button, it will make those sounds. And so if you're in an area that's typically very quiet, they may not like all the noise, and you'll sometimes get complaints from the residents. And so, it's something you probably don't want to go putting this at every location, but you want to put them in locations where somebody's going to use them, where someone needs them. And I think that's an appropriate response. It's interesting, I was at a TRB meeting several years ago, and they were talking about accessible pedestrian signals. And there's two different groups that advocate for the blind. And one says you need to put these at every single intersection everywhere. And the other group says you don't need those at any section anywhere, because the blind are listening for the cars and they can't hear the cars over all the chirps and burps and other strange sounds. And so there's really no middle ground between those two positions. And so these two groups that both say they're advocating for the blind, one says put them in everywhere, the other says put them in nowhere. There's no middle ground there. And so as an agency, you have to really figure out what works best for you. And like I said, what we chose to do, the agency I work with, was work with the Lighthouse for the Blind. We wouldn't put them in everywhere, but we'd put them in at locations where there were users that needed them. And so as soon as a location was identified that needed them, again, Lighthouse for the work with that person so that they would understand the message we're trying to convey to them through the audible sounds, and we put in the device so we could convey that message to them. So I think that's a sensible way to do it, but each agency needs to work out what works best for them. Intersection lighting. Again, intersection lighting, very important for reducing nighttime crashes. Can reduce nighttime crashes in half, can cut them in half. And so where you have a really busy urban area where you're going to have a lot of interaction between pedestrians, bicyclists, and motor vehicles, you really want continuous lighting. You want to light up the area so that people can see, so that drivers can see the pedestrians walking along the road that may be about to enter the crosswalk, and so that the people in the crosswalk can see the vehicles coming up the road, and they can each make good choices. Do I go now or do I wait now? And so continuous lighting in the urban areas is fairly important. I mentioned pedestrian road safety audit I did a couple of weeks ago is really interesting. This was in a really neat little area up in the Jacksonville area, District 2, and it had a little strip commercial area in the center of the corridor we were looking at, with residential areas on both sides of the commercial area. In the residential areas, there was a lot of really mature live oak trees, old, beautiful, old growth oak trees. And I mean, it made it really, really beautiful, nice, shady place to walk and stuff during the day, but it created a lot of shadows and stuff at night. So the commercial area was fairly well lit up. The sidewalks were lit up fairly nicely. You could see very well. But when you got out into the residential areas, there was a lot of tree blockage. The trees created shadows all over the sidewalks, and you really felt a lot more unsafe in the residential areas there. So when you're considering intersection lighting, one of the things you do have to look at is trees, foliage. Is it going to be blocking the lighting, creating shadows? And especially at intersections, it may be necessary to cut back some of the trees because you don't want people suddenly popping out of shadows into a crosswalk. And so certainly, everyone wants the trees, and especially in the hot summer days of Florida, it's nice to have some shade during the daytime when you're walking. But you also have to balance that with the safety of, are we creating shadows and going to make it where the pedestrians are invisible at night? And so, again, you have to weigh both of those things as you're working on your intersection design and operating your intersections, thinking about, are we creating a worse situation at night than we really need to have? So important things to think about, again, in designing and operating your intersection is shadows from trees and those kind of things. The AASHTO informational guide has a lot of good information on roadway lighting and great reference to get some more information on that. All right, and one of the other users, bicyclists. There's several different types of bicyclists. You typically hear these broken down into the ABCs of bicyclists. A being the advanced bicyclists. These are the people that bike long distances, and they have the spandex outfits, and they're usually wearing helmets, and they have very nice expensive bikes. So that's your advanced bicyclist. Then we have the basic bicyclist, and this is just somebody, typically they've got a bicycle in a garage, and maybe on Saturday, hey, let's go for a short bike ride down to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee or something. And so, the basic bicyclist typically will not be wearing a helmet, and is not somebody that's going to go on a 20-mile bike ride, but may go a couple miles down the road, again, to do some shopping or just have a good afternoon out. I live out in the country, and so there's a different B group out here, and that's Bubba. The Bubba bicyclists, you don't get too much in the cities, but there's the Bubba bicyclists out here in the country that sometimes we have to think about and figure out what we're going to do with the Bubba bicyclists. But for our conversation today, we'll stick with the advanced, and then B being the basic bicyclists. The next group is C, the children, and again, it's another user group we need to be thinking about, need to be aware of when we're looking at our intersections and trying to operate our intersections safely. Often the children bicyclists are going to be operating on the sidewalks and in the crosswalks, not as the advanced bicyclists would, but more like pedestrians. So it's, again, something else, again, just as someone operating intersections, an agency responsible for operating your intersections, something you need to be thinking about. And actually, there really is another group of bicyclists that we need to be thinking about somewhat as well. That's the D group. That's the drunks. And so it's tough to accommodate those, but we do have some impaired bicyclists that do impact intersection safety. They do show up in crash statistics. Oftentimes, one of the things we find is, people that are just alcohol addicted, they've lost their driver's license, can't drive their car, so then they hop on their bicycle and go back and forth to the liquor store on their bicycle. And if you're impaired out there as a bicyclist, again, you're endangering yourself and others. But certainly it's a tough thing to design for those, but it's another group that sometimes shows up in the crash statistics. Over half of the bicycle vehicle crashes occur at intersections. Often it's vehicles turning in front of the bicycles, the right hook type thing. It's typically just the vehicles aren't looking for the bicyclists, or the bicyclists aren't looking for the vehicles, so they don't have good visibility. They're not yielding to each other. They're not seeing each other operating, and so that's what causes many of the bicycle crashes. Bicycle crashes due to overtaking, where the vehicle just runs up on the back of the bicycle, are really few and far between. Most of the crashes do occur just a vehicle turning in front of the bicycle or vice versa. I mean, we do see a lot of things when you're out there on the road where bicycles are riding the wrong direction and they're cutting across the roadway in places where they shouldn't be cutting across the roadway. But many of the crashes do happen at intersections, and again, it's just vehicles turning in front of the bicycles or turning on top of the bicycles or vice versa. One of the other users is transit vehicles, the buses that operate on the roadways. Bus stops can be near side, far side, or mid-block. But wherever you locate a bus stop, the important thing to remember is that every bus stop, every transit stop is a de facto pedestrian crossing. People are going to get off the bus and cross the road. And so in the picture shown here, you can see there is a marked pedestrian crossing, the pedestrian warning sign with the downward diagonal arrow right there next to the bus stop. So if you hopped off the bus, hopefully that's going to show you this is where we expect you to cross. And the agency here has done some really good things. They've provided a very well identified crossing location right next to the bus stop, and that's how it should be. That you get off the bus, say, okay, that's where I'm supposed to cross, and there you go to cross. So very well done situation there. One of the things I wanted to look at also in the talking about designing and operating intersections for safety is not just urban intersections, but also rural intersections. This is NHTSA's Traffic Safety Facts provided this data, and you can see there's actually more motor vehicle fatalities in rural areas than urban areas. And so this hopefully will be helpful for some of the folks up in Citrus and Hernando County and northern Pasco County, some of the agencies up there. Hopefully there'll be some useful stuff for you as well, that there are a lot of rural intersections that need work as well, and so we don't need to concentrate just on the stuff in the cities, but also apply the right things in the country as well. Looking at the traffic safety facts, it's 19% of the U.S. population is in the rural areas. 55% of the fatalities are in the rural areas. So again, we don't want to skew too much to the cities. We also need to be thinking about those rural areas as well. But we'll start with, let's look at urban intersection example. This is an intersection I looked at a couple years ago. It's in Pinellas County, and I forgot the names of the intersecting streets, but anyhow, it's an urban intersection in Pinellas County, and they were having a problem with some sideswipe crashes at this intersection. And so the countermeasure really here, a very simple countermeasure, will be lane designation. And to the left side of the picture you see on the screen there, let me get my laser pointer here. Lost my laser pointer. All right, we've got 2 lanes coming in from this direction, from the west, and there's 3 lanes over here, so there's a lane addition. And so, again, coming in with 2, going out with 3 on this side. And when you look at the geometry, the inside through lane here lines up with the inside through lane there. And likewise, the outside through lane here lines up with the middle through lane on that side. But we're having a lot of sideswipe crashes from this approach at that intersection. You can see it a little bit in the aerial photograph what might be going on, but really, like anything else, if you got a crash problem, the best thing to do is go out to the street, see what's going on in the street. Go out in the street, and this is what you see. This is across the hood of my car. Here is the lane straight ahead. Okay, and so I'm in the inside through lane approaching the intersection, and that's the lane that's straight ahead that should be receiving me. But what you see is the pavement joint, when the intersection was paved, leads you to the middle lane. So this is the inside lane approaching the intersection, but the pavement joint points you towards the middle lane. So again, it's, the geometry, strictly the geometry would lead you straight ahead into the inside lane, but some of the other stuff on the ground points you to the middle lane. So what's a good, inexpensive, low-cost countermeasure there? Well, if we just put in some skip striping to guide that inside through lane to the center and the outside through lane to the outside lane. Hopefully that should reduce the sideswipe crashes that were occurring in the intersection. Low-cost countermeasure, again, just designating the lanes because that's what it looked like, again, when you're on the ground, that the inside lane goes to the middle. And so we just want to make sure we add in the appropriate guidance to the motorists to point them in the right direction to do what they're supposed to do. I want to look at a rural intersection next. When you get into the rural roadways, again, things get a little bit different. The speeds are higher. One of the other things, though, is you have to introduce a whole new group of users at rural intersections. This is a road. This is on that same roadway that I just showed you there. And I was driving down the road and come up on the back of this. This is it's a tractor pulling what is a 6-row planter. They were planting cotton at the time, so 6 rows of cotton being planted simultaneously. This is a 12-foot lane. There's a couple feet of shoulder, and you can see he's taking up all of the 12-foot lane, all of the shoulder, hanging over about 4 feet on this side, and also hanging a couple feet over this side. So the width of this 6-row planter is in the ballpark of 20 or more. And so, a different user out here that you don't see typically in the city. And so again, 12-foot lane on this 2-lane rural highway, 55-mile-an-hour posted speed, operating speed well in excess of that. And the tractor unable to go anything above about 25. But again, he's lawfully using the roadway with his 20-plus foot of width on 12 foot of pavement in this direction plus shoulder. And you can imagine when there's mailboxes or signposts or other things real close to the edge of the roadway, he takes up all of the opposing lane as well. And so some interesting things happen when you're out on the rural roadways. This is actually my brother-in-law's hay cutting equipment. And if any of you think you have a real big bad zero-turn radius mower, you ain't got nothing on this. This thing is zero-turn radius. The width across the front is just over 16 feet, so he can cut 16 feet of grass in one swath with this thing. But again, he takes this machine out on those 2-lane rural highways with 12 foot of pavement, some of which have 0 shoulder. And you can see, again, rural roadways have their own issues, and again, has to go through some intersections out there as he takes this from hayfield to hayfield. But one of the things out in the country, we also do occasionally ride our bikes, and so yeah, you can see we pack our bikes with us and take us with us sometimes when we're out there on the roadways. But anyhow, let's look at a rural intersection. This intersection, we'll be looking at this intersection right here, Hambrick Road. There was a bridge replacement project going on, and they were replacing this bridge over the Withlacoochee River here. And when they did that, they decided to improve the intersection, because the intersection prior to the bridge project, the roadway came in and intersected a skew. And so, skewed intersections definitely create a lot of operational issues, safety issues, and it's much better to have it intersect at a right angle. And so they moved the intersection from the skewed intersection here, swung it up here to where it's a right angle intersection. But when you do that kind of thing, you have to make sure you don't create some other issues. And so bringing this intersection up to a right angle here, a few other things had to be taken care of to design it and operate it safely. So again, here's the aerial photograph. And again, this is Hambrick Road, and it used to come in just at a skew right about here, just used to come in right about there. And when they widened the bridge, because it was a real narrow bridge, I think the lane widths were about 10 feet, and so they widened it to 12 foot with some paved shoulder in there. So replaced the bridge, got a nice wide bridge. They also said, well, this intersection is close to the bridge, let's extend the project and fix this intersection. But again, when you swing this intersection up like that, we have to make sure we've safely designed it and we can operate it safely. So what does it look like on Hambrick Road back here as we approach the intersection? If you get way back here on Hambrick Road, it looks like this. You're coming to the intersection, and again, it used to just go straight on up into there to intersect 122. But now, on Hambrick Road, posted speed here on Hambrick is 45. But again, rural road out in the middle of nowhere, people operating a lot faster than that. But as you approach the intersection, you got stop ahead on both sides of the road, and you can start seeing the chevrons up ahead directing you around the curve. Also got rumble strips here to raised rumble strips to wake the motorists up. Hey, you're about to have to stop. So raised rumble strips in here. Again, the chevrons pointing you around the curve. As we get closer to the curve, again, the chevrons pointing you around. The stop sign located here is actually on the left-hand side of the intersection, on the left-hand side of the approach, because the curve curves away so far. So as you're approaching it, the chevron's pointing you around the curve, left-hand stop sign to really let you know, hey, this is where I'm supposed to stop. So as you get closer to it, again, stop signs on the left that you saw first, and now you stop sign on the right, which is the typical place where you're going to stop, right at the stop line. And they've done a really good job here designing and making this intersection where it will operate safely. It works real well. All these photos were taken in the daytime. It works real well at night. All those signs, all the chevrons, the stop ahead warning signs, the left-hand stop sign, all that stuff gets your attention at night. So you know, oh, I'm coming up to a place where I need to stop. Again, this is a very rural, dark country road. You get out here at night, especially on nights when there's not much moonlight and maybe cloud cover, whatever. It's a very, very dark, rural country road, and having the appropriate devices out there, all the stop ahead warning signs, all the chevrons, the left-hand stop sign, all that stuff really stands out and says, oh, get ready to stop. I'm approaching an intersection. So, very well done thing. The kind of thing when you're doing rural intersection design you need to be thinking about. Oh, another thing they did on the main street on State Road 22, intersection ahead warning signs, and again they put the intersection ahead warning signs and the street name. It's a really good enhancement if you have high-speed rural roadways to do this. It's kind of the same mentality as in the urban areas where we put the next signal sign to let people know what the next signal is so they can make decisions. Do I need to get over in the left lane? Do I need to get over in the right lane or whatever? In the rural area, it tells me I'm approaching Hambrick Road. If I'm not looking for Hambrick Road, I just keep driving. If I'm looking for Hambrick Road, then now I can start slowing down. And this makes it a lot safer. If you did not have this advanced warning sign and somebody is unfamiliar with the area looking for Hambrick Road, they have to slow down a lot to try to see the regular conventional street name sign here. And so there's a lot of slowing down and speeding up and slowing down and speeding up as they approach these rural intersections without this kind of advanced warning sign. So this is a real good safety enhancement for rural high-speed roadways. Recommended highly. I believe the Highway Safety Manual says it's a crash reduction of over 30% on rural high-speed roadways to do this kind of advanced signing. All right, so I hope somebody's awake here. And let's see, quick MUTCD quiz. Okay, the intersection ahead warning sign here shows 3 roadways. Which street name corresponds to which roadway in the sign pictured? And you don't have to type in your answers, but what do you think? Well, the way that the MUTCD spells it out, there's the reference, section 2C58. Nursery Road is the first one that you would see, or the first one that you would encounter. So since the roadway is shown from the bottom towards the top, Nursery Road, which appears as the top, is the one on the bottom here. Norwegian Road would be the one to the right in the center, and Campground Road is the one on the top. So per the MUTCD, that's the way you lay it out. So Nursery Road is the top here, but it's the bottom here. Norwegian's the middle. Campground is the bottom one listed here. It's the top one listed there. So, and again, there's the MUTCD reference. Here's another figure, same thing. And this is actually a little bit better in terms of when you look at that section. One of the things they say is that for the one that's a little further up the road, it should be an advance arrow like what's shown here, where you go up and then to the left. However, the first thing you encounter should be the first one on top. So Deer Ridge Road really should be on the top. Hubbard Road should be the one underneath it at this location. But anyhow, like I said, these advanced intersection warning signs are very helpful in the rural areas. All right, we've all heard of one-way streets. Here's a no-way street. Can't go left, can't go right, can't back up, can't go forward. So you're just kind of stuck. So hopefully you don't have any of those in your areas. All right. But anyhow, let's look at intersection treatments. When we do intersection treatments, here's someone put in some guardrail to this mast arm upright. Did it really make it safer? Do we have enough advanced distance, for this end of the guardrail to protect that mast arm upright? So that's one of the things you need to be thinking about when you're trying to do some of these safety treatments. We want to make sure we're making it actually safer. So don't add any unsafe features. Is this an appropriate end treatment for this guardrail? It doesn't appear to be. I'm not sure, but it doesn't appear to be. So we want to make sure we don't make it unsafe. When we're doing intersection treatments, we want to be making it better. We want to remove or reduce the crash potential if we can, and correct the causes of crashes, reduce the occurrence, reduce the severity, and increase the survivability of crashes. Here's some of the other things we're doing at a lot of intersections now. It's pretty much the standard now is the retroreflective backplates really help your signals to stand out daytime or nighttime. Again, makes your signal faces just much more apparent, much more visible to the approaching user. So one of the things that's out there, like I said, it's really become pretty much the standard now. We're putting in the retroreflective backplates on all signals. A good intersection enhancement makes the intersection safer. I showed this one before. Overhead lane assignment, we mentioned it, good for the elderly road users, but really good for all the road users, especially unfamiliar road users, like where you have tourists, like throughout Florida. So a real good thing to be thinking about is overhead lane assignment or good clear lane assignment in places where there might be some confusion. Well, no discussion on intersections will be complete without mentioning roundabouts. Certainly they're getting a lot of attention now. The state, Florida DOT is requiring each and every one of the districts to have at least 2 roundabouts in the 5-year work program. So a lot more attention being put on roundabouts. It's something that Billy in the training class last week was saying, that it's something DOT's been talking about for years, but there's only a couple on the state road system. There's roundabouts throughout Florida, but most of them are on the local roadways. And so DOT is getting more serious about doing them on the state roads as well. But it's certainly something a lot of locals should be considering, at least looking at roundabouts as a good form of intersection traffic control. One of the main things with roundabouts greatly reduces the number of conflicts and the type of conflicts at an intersection. There are no crossing conflicts at a roundabout. All your conflicts are just a merge followed by a diverge all the way around the circle. And so it's greatly reduced number of conflicts, and again, the more severe conflicts, the crossing conflicts, are eliminated. So very good for vehicles, also good for pedestrians if you design the roundabout properly. Very significant safety improvement for the pedestrians as well if you design the roundabout properly. So significant reduction in conflicts for pedestrians as well. Some of the essential roundabout design characteristics, again, it has to be designed well if it's going to operate well. And so you want to have in all these things, the splitter islands, the separated sidewalks, to pull the peds away from the circulating roadway and direct them to the places where you intend them to cross. You pull the crosswalk 1 car length back. The crosswalk is pulled 1 car length back from the yield line, and that's because the vehicle that's here at the yield line is looking for a gap. A vehicle that's behind the first vehicle is looking ahead for when is that clown going to get out of my way. And so a pedestrian that's trying to cross here is much more likely to be in that driver's cone of vision. And so again, you pull a crosswalk, one car length back is the place to put the crosswalk when you're doing roundabout design. You want to have truck aprons in your roundabout, so big heavy vehicles, when they make the circle, their back wheels may run up on this thing, but you want to make your truck apron where it's very uncomfortable for cars to go over it. Some of the roundabouts that were down in Sarasota and some other locations in Florida did not make a significant enough truck apron, and so vehicles just ran straight across the truck apron. And so with that poor design, they didn't get the speed reduction they really needed. So it's important you do a good truck apron. The truck can mount it and go through it when they need to, but your cars deflect around it. So it's really important that if you're going to do a roundabout, you do it properly. If you don't design it properly, you're not going to get the speed reduction and the safety benefits that you want out of your roundabout. So again, the vehicles entering the roundabout have to turn to the right, turn to the left, turn to the right to operate through the roundabout, and that causes them to slow down and go much slower. Well, that's the main reason roundabouts are a lot safer for all users. The speeds are reduced. Slow speeds, again, reducing the conflicts. You don't have any left turns, no crossing conflicts, and everyone yield on entry. And you can see the crash reduction factors in there. Again, tremendous safety enhancement for well-designed, well-operated roundabouts. But one of the things I always say when I'm talking about roundabouts is you got to use the right tool for the right job. This is a sign my daughter gave me. I always give her a lot of motivational things, so she gave me a motivational sign. And just by the way, that's Larry. But let's say I have this sign my daughter gave me, and I want to give me a nail and put it up on the wall of my office. Well, personally, I have driven a nail with a pair of pliers. With this pair of pliers I'm showing here, I've driven a nail with that pair of pliers. I've also driven a nail with a crescent wrench. But is that the right tool for that job? Obviously not. You need a hammer. Well, okay, there's a hammer. Is that the right tool for the job? Well, no, that's a hammer for sure, but again, the scale of that hammer is not the right size hammer. So this is more the tool I need for the job of nailing that sign up in my office. The roundabout is the same kind of thing. It's one of the tools in a traffic engineer's toolbox, and a roundabout will work well in many locations, but there's many locations where a roundabout really will not work well. And so you need to really look at each location and see if it's the right tool for the job. A roundabout is a great tool in many locations, but like I said, it's the wrong tool in some locations. So make sure that you pull out the right tool out of your toolbox. Some locations really will work better with a traffic signal. Australia has led the world, I think, in implementation of roundabouts, or they're certainly one of the leading places for the use of roundabouts. I've been to Australia, and one of the things that when you drive around Australia, there's still a lot of traffic signals. And so if you pull up Google Earth and go right to Sydney, Australia, you can look down on the Sydney Opera House. And just a couple blocks from Sydney Opera House in downtown Sydney, there's a whole bunch of signalized intersections. So I remember years ago, the guy that wrote Sidra, Dr. Rami Axlick, was speaking at University of South Florida at Qatar, and one of the things he said was, he couldn't believe how many four-way stops we have here in the U.S. He said, gosh, in Australia, all of those would be roundabouts. And so if you're a local agency and you're thinking about, gosh, where's a place I should think about putting in a roundabout? Well, that's probably a place to start. If you've got some four-way stops, you might want to see if those would be good roundabout locations. To one of the roundabout gurus of the world, Rami Axlick, those should all be roundabouts. And so if you're thinking about where's a good place to put a roundabout, start with your four-way stops. The roundabout guru said that's a no-brainer, essentially. So that's a good place to start. Some of the other locations, it's a great tool. Some locations it's a bad tool. But roundabouts, when they're used and designed properly and put in the right place, are very effective in reducing crashes and making intersections safer. All right, this is another location close to where I live. When you see this kind of stuff on your signs, do you think there might be a problem? This is actually an interstate off-ramp. And when you see a sign that says sudden traffic from the left, what does that mean? Well, it means you probably don't have adequate sight distance, or the people are driving a little faster than they should, and there's been crashes here, and so somebody stuck up a warning sign to try to make it better. And certainly at this interchange, this is the problem. You've got limited sight distance. And so, when you see these kind of signs at location, it should clue you in that maybe there's something I need to do here. Maybe there is some improvements that need to be made. This is a location in Tampa. I saw this sign, caution tight turn radius, and they've got this post. This is interest to a commercial area. They've got the post sticking in this cast iron pipe that's about 3/4 filled with concrete. Now, is there a problem here? Well, yes, the problem was the semis were running over it and continued knocking down this sign. And the radius was extremely tight. And this sign was also installed parallel to the incoming roadway, and so the trucks wouldn't see it until they were halfway into the turn. And so did they really solve the problem? Well, probably not. Maybe they needed to look at, should I increase the turn radius? I don't know. When you see a sign like this, okay, stop sign, we've got the panel underneath it telling you the cross traffic does not stop. It's telling you stop at the stop line, and then it's telling you to look again. When you see that kind of sign, it's that telling you, again, sight distance is probably compromised. And certainly one of the things we need to be thinking about anytime you're designing or operating an intersection, when you're investigating an intersection for safety improvements, what's the sight distance like? What is the sight distance like? Do I have adequate sight distance for a user to make good decisions? And so, when you see this kind of stuff, look again. It means something is probably a little bit amiss there, less than desirable. And so, what kind of things can we do to try to improve that situation? This is how not to fix a dangerous intersection. Don't just post a sign saying it's a dangerous intersection. I mean, if it's a dangerous intersection, why is it dangerous? What kind of things can we do to improve it? And certainly, just posting a sign that says dangerous intersection isn't going to really help too many people. And so, are there some things we need to do? Do we need to close the intersection? Do we need to restrict different movements? Do we need to install lighting? Do we need to install speed humps or something to reduce speeds? Do we need to do something more drastic? Certainly just sticking up a dangerous intersection sign is not a good treat. Likewise here for the bikes, just drawing a picture of the bike with the crushed wheel and the guy flying over the bridge and into the water below or onto the rocks below, probably not a real good idea. Can we do something rather than create a sign? Can we do something to really address the issue? So as we look at safety improvements, just a few pointers here on doing signing at intersections. You want to make sure that you give good, clear direction to the motorists as they approach. So through traffic must turn right. You want to make sure you don't give any conflicting instructions. Make sure your instructions you give to the motorists don't conflict with another. This is a really interesting one. Make sure your signs convey a message that the users can understand. I don't know if anyone really understands what this means. The right lane must turn right. But if your name is Max, you're exempt. I don't think so. Actually, this is in Las Vegas, and Max is the regional transit system, and they were doing some stuff. They're trying to do some stuff here with queue jumping for the buses. And so if you were the MAX vehicle, the local transit system, you were exempt from turning right. And one of the things they do here, you might be able to make it out in the picture, I think they have since abandoned this, and I hope so, because what they did is they would do a queue jump where if the transit vehicle was detected in the right turn lane, they would give a special indication for the signal to, let the bus go on through the intersection before they release the cars. But the way they did that, they illuminated this signal face that's up above the red. They have a signal face that's above the red indication. Now, if you are a colorblind road user, what does this look like to you? What does this solid indication in the second space down look like? Well, if you're colorblind, that's where you expect to see a yellow indication. That's where you would expect to see the yellow, because the red is supposed to always be on top. So again, not the best operation here. And again, in a very high tourist area like Las Vegas, is max exempt going to be clear to most of the tourists? Probably not. So you need to really think about some of the signing you do there when you're trying to do fancy things. I mean, transit signal priority is something that is needed in many locations and a good thing to do to help out the transit vehicles, but certainly I think this implementation left a little bit to be desired there. Another thing, signing at intersections, don't overdo it with information. I mean, this looks like way too much information approaching this intersection to figure out where you're going and how to get there and which lane to be in to get there and that kind of stuff. So spread out those messages. Don't overdo it with too much information and too compressed a time. But don't make it too simple. We do need some appropriate signing at our intersections, so make sure you do use appropriate signing in the places where you want them. And again, make sure you give the user adequate time to respond the way you want them to, not just, oops, sidewalk closed here, sorry. And you shouldn't have to sign for stuff that should be obvious. Oh gosh, look at that. Traffic entering the highway at an intersection. Imagine. Do make sure you address all the needs of all the users. That's important. Make sure you address all the folks that might be using your intersection. And please don't forget about the pedestrians. And make sure you do use the right sign. This is clearly the wrong sign, but make sure you use the right signs. And when you're talking about designing and operating intersections for safety, you make sure that you maintain your signs as well. Plenty of good resources to help you do that. The Highway Safety Manual, the AASHTO Green Book, and in the center, the MUTCD. Some really good resources. This is another good resource, ITE publication, the Toolbox on Intersection Safety and Design. And the web address there, you can download this, actually a PDF of this book for free, or you can order it through the ITE bookstore. Toolbox on Intersection Safety and Design. And actually, one of the chapters in there, the chapter on traffic control devices, is extremely well written. You really, I think, will enjoy that chapter on traffic control devices in that toolbox. But again, you can download it for free at that web address shown on the slide there. Another good resource is the NCHRP 500 series. This is a 23-volume series of reports dealing with highway safety, and this is one of the volumes you see here, Volume 5, a guide for addressing unsignalized intersection collisions. And the web address at the bottom, you can download all 23 volumes of NCHRP 500 for free from that web address you see at the bottom of the screen there. For our topic here today of designing and operating intersections for safety, 4 of the 500 series volumes I think are particularly applicable. Volume 12 is signalized intersections. I mentioned Volume 5, unsignalized intersections. Volume 10, pedestrians, and Volume 18, bicycles. And so all 4 of those volumes, excellent, very helpful when you're looking at reducing crashes for those user groups or at those locations. And again, you can download all 23 volumes of NCHRP 500 at that address on the bottom of the screen. Really good stuff. And interesting stuff in the NCHRP 500s. It tells you, some of the different things you can do for each of those types of situations, and gives you some guidance on things to look for if you're trying to implement different countermeasures. Is it going to be a high-cost countermeasure, a low-cost countermeasure, and just some of the other things you need to think about if you're going to implement some of the countermeasures there. So I strongly recommend NCHRP 500. Great information in that series of books. And with that, I'm going to say that's all, folks. I do want to give you a quick reminder. If you're interested in the PDHs, send your PDH form to me. There's the email address, or you can fax it to me toll-free at the number there. And with that, we'll see if there's any questions in the chat.
We do have some questions, Larry. I apologize. I was taking care of a fire that I needed to put out during the presentation, so I didn't get a chance to interrupt and ask the questions at the pertinent times.
Okay.
So we're going to have to go back and remember what was said. But someone would like to know with regards to the lighting. Would lighting be effective for safety if it covers only the intersection, but then the corridors linked by the intersection are not well lit?
Well, certainly it's going to help. It will make the intersection safer, and especially if you have, a lot of pedestrian activity or other crossing activity at the intersection, lighting up the intersection where an approaching motorist can see someone waiting at the side of the road, waiting in the crosswalk that may enter the roadway. Having that intersection lighting will certainly be very helpful. So yes, I would say it would be helpful to do it at the intersections. If you can't light up the whole corridor, still do it at the intersections if you can. That will benefit a lot of folks. If you have mid-block crossings and a lot of people crossing where they really shouldn't be crossing, yes, that's not going to help that too much. But certainly lighting up the intersections, especially in locations where you do have not just vehicles, but pedestrians and bicycles and other things going on, lighting up the intersection will certainly help those safety issues.
Yeah, I completely agree. A place that perhaps would give another clue to the solution for that would be the crash modification factor clearinghouse. That is the place to identify, the crash modifications for crashes. I did a quick search for lighting on there, and there are separate countermeasures for provide intersection lighting versus just provide lighting and provide illumination and provide lighting for partial interchange. And the crash modification factors vary depending on what it is that you're doing out there, and certainly the intersection lighting I think would have a benefit, particularly for those pedestrians at those intersections.
But I mean, I've also seen in rural areas where there's not a lot of pedestrian or bicycle activity, if you've got an intersection that seems to have just a lot of nighttime crashes, just lighting up the intersection, again, to the approaching motorist, when you're on a rural dark country road and you look up ahead and something is lit, you say, gosh, there's something different there. And so it really helps the intersection stand out as, oh gosh, there's a place here where I might need to pay more attention. And so I've seen rural intersection locations, again, that don't have peds or bikes, where adding in the intersection lighting just made it safer for the vehicles.
A question about signal heads. Is there anyone working on larger pedestrian signals for use in larger intersections?
Oh, that's a great question. Not that I am aware of. I'm not aware anybody's looking at anything beyond what the MUTCD now has. I mean, I've heard a couple people mention that, and that probably is something that MUTCD needs to address, is do we need to, for those really wide intersections where you've got, over 100 feet of crossing distance or over 150 feet of crossing distance, do we need something larger still for the pedestrians? Or, at that point, do you go to where you, have, near side and far side pedestrian heads, or mandate heads in the median or something like that? I don't know. But to the best of my knowledge, yeah, a mandated two-stage crossing. Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, nobody's doing that yet. Nobody's really out deploying something larger than the MUTCD. I suppose you could, if you could find somebody to make it, because the MUTCD standards are minimums, I guess. So if you went to a 36-inch pedestrian indication, you've certainly met the minimums of the MUTCD and gone way beyond it. And so as long as you had the appropriate colors and design features, it would probably be a conforming device. But I'm not aware of anybody doing anything larger than the sizes specified in the MUTCD.
And looks like someone would like additional conversation regarding roundabouts. They're questioning the crash reductions at roundabouts. There was a study that was done at an intersection where they saw an increase in the crashes. But the good part is that the fatalities and severe injury crashes decreased. So I don't know if you want to kind of discuss some of the benefits of roundabouts and why that is in more detail.
Well, yeah, certainly I think one of the things with roundabouts is a lot of people go and oversell the roundabout as a solution to all the safety problems. If you just rip out all your signals and put in roundabouts, everything will be so much better. And that's really not the case. Like I said, in Australia, they still have plenty of traffic signals, loads and loads of traffic signals. And at some locations, really and truly, a signal is better than a roundabout. And so at a location where crashes went up, I would suspect a couple things are probably going on. Number one, a lot of the drivers in the U.S. really still aren't that familiar with roundabouts. And if you go in too aggressively and put in roundabouts at a location, at a really bad location, if you got a signal that's failing, and you say, well, I'll just put in a roundabout, that'll solve all my problems. You got a location that's destined to fail as a roundabout, failing as a signal, and you're not really addressing the needs of the motorists out there, and especially when people aren't familiar with roundabouts. I think many agencies should really start with more simple intersections, get people somewhat used to operating in roundabouts, yielding to the circulating flow, and sliding in and out of roundabouts efficiently and quickly. Don't take your worst intersection and drop in a multi-lane roundabout if no one in the area has ever seen a single-lane roundabout. So I think we need to start small and work towards getting more people used to roundabouts, and I think that might be part of the problem. And again, there was a roundabout many years ago in Daytona Beach. I was very familiar with this. Back when I was in high school, this roundabout existed back before there was even so much talk about the modern roundabout. And it was on one side of one of the bridges going over the Intercoastal Waterway. And the roundabout worked very well except for one approach. One approach of that particular roundabout had really severe crash problems. And it was because for that one approach, it was not designed properly. They did not have adequate deflection. They entered on a tangent rather than deflecting into the circle. And so that one approach just had horrible, horrible crash problems. The rest of the roundabout worked fairly well. And so I say all that to say a real key to a roundabout working well and getting the kind of crash reductions that are shown in those crash reduction factors is the proper design. You have to have the proper design all the way around it with all the design features, the splitter islands, deflection for everyone. Everyone has to slow down on entry and deflect all the way through. Like I said, Sarasota, one of their roundabouts had a lot of problems because the truck apron wasn't designed adequately, and cars were just driving straight across the truck apron. And so the speeds were much higher. The cars coming in didn't deflect the way they needed to, and so they had bad crash problems there. But I think that's probably a long-winded answer to the question. But I think really the question is, the roundabouts that had an increase in crashes, was it really designed to have the adequate deflection? Were all the design features in place for the roundabout? And also, like you said, Anthony, was it an increase in sideswipe crashes and possibly rear end crashes but you've eliminated a whole bunch of angle crashes and more severe crashes. And so it's just like anytime you put in a traffic signal, when you put in a traffic signal, especially put in a traffic signal based on the crash warrant, well, your crash numbers are going to go up because you are going to increase the number of rear-end crashes, but hopefully you're going to decrease the angle crashes and left-turning crashes and that kind of stuff. And so I suspect at that location, whoever that was that asked that question, I suspect what was going on, there was an increase in crashes, but they were side swipes and they were rear-end crashes. Severity went way, way down, but the numbers probably went way, way up. But again, to make roundabouts work safely, you really have to pay attention to all the design features.
Yeah, I mean, to that, I guess I want to add some quantitative numbers to that. Unless you were talking, I looked up the CMF clearinghouse modifications for this as well, and there's various CMFs in here. If you guys have ever used the clearinghouse, you know that it can be a little confusing. But there is a 2007 study from NCHRP report number 572 that says that you should expect about a 3% increase in overall crashes when you convert from a four-way stop to a roundabout, but you should have a 45% decrease of all your fatal, severe injury and minor injury crashes. So like Larry was alluding to, you may have additional side swipes or rear ends just because at a roundabout things are moving, but you're trading off angle and left turn crashes at that location. The one that I found that has the most increases in crashes was a 2013 study called the Evaluation of Roundabout Safety. This was done out of DC, and it is from the Transportation Research Board, paper number 13-2060, and that one says that you should expect about a 10% increase in all crashes. So I mean anywhere from 3 to 10% increase, but you've got 50% decrease of your injury crashes. So I mean that's a pretty good trade-off. Again, it's about using the right tool for the right job. To add to the conversation, Larry, what are your feelings about bicycle and pedestrians at roundabouts?
Like I said, the pedestrian, if you pull the stop line back, like I showed in that slide, pull the crosswalk back one vehicle length from the yield line at the roundabout, pedestrians can operate very safely in roundabouts. It is interesting for bicycles in roundabout, and again it goes back to the three different bicycle groups, the A, B, and C bicyclists. The A bicyclist, the more advanced bicyclist, is going to want to go through the roundabout like a vehicle, yielding to vehicles in the roundabout, and that's typically how your A bicyclist is going to go through a roundabout. Your B and C bicyclists, your basic bicyclist, and your children. What's shown in all of the roundabout design guides is you create for the bicycles to leave the bike lanes and essentially go up to the sidewalks. So that for the B and C bicyclists, they're going to go through a roundabout as a pedestrian. And so they're going to go up onto the sidewalks and typically cross at the crosswalk locations. And so that's, again, what you see at most roundabout design guides I've seen is as the approach is getting close to the roundabout, one of the things to make sure you have the adequate speed reduction that you want at the roundabout is you want to keep the lane width as tight as you can for the approaching design vehicle. And so you taper out or you eliminate bike lane on the approach, because again, if you have a real wide approach, it leads to vehicles trying to skirt around the center island without having to deflect or deflecting less than they really should, and so they're not slowing down as much as they should. So again, what I see in the design guides is the B and C bicyclists are typically going to get up on the sidewalk and go through the roundabout like a pedestrian, whereas the real advanced bicyclist is going to act like a vehicle going through there, because legally a bicycle is a vehicle. So that's how they should go through roundabouts. But again, it is one of the issues of if you're not familiar with roundabouts, if you've never been through a roundabout, first time through it as a bicyclist might be a little bit scary. And so again, that's why personally I really advocate if you're an agency that's thinking about putting in roundabouts, start slow. Start with some single lane roundabouts at some locations that aren't too heavily traveled before you go in and decide to put a multi-lane roundabout at one of the busiest intersections. Give your users a chance to get familiar with operating in the roundabout before you go to anything really drastic and dramatic. So I hope that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, that's a great discussion. The only other question that I have in the chat is regarding the GoToWebinar itself, and that is if there is a way for the attendees to see the list of the other attendees, because they want to know who's on the chat, and I will look into that. I'm not sure if I'm able to do that or not. There are 58 people on the call right now, if that helps. But yeah, I'm not sure, because with Fuse you could see each other's names. Now you cannot.
Yeah, I think that is something in GoToMeeting you can see all the other attendees, and GoToWebinar I don't know that you can, but
Yeah,
that's something to look at.
Webinars intended to not do that. I mean, I can extract the list of attendees, and if anybody would like to know specifically, who attended, I can provide the list. Here's the names of the people that were here. If you have staff that you're trying to give credit to, that were supposed to be at the meeting, or for whatever reason that question was asked. I guess I can give everyone a few minutes here to see if something else pops up in the chat. But
Anthony,
those are all the questions that I have right now.
Anthony, this is Dennis. I think the max we had at one time was 67 on.
67 today. Wow.
67.
That's great.
Well, for all of those still out there, I hope you got something useful out of this, and hope there is some information here that can help you design and operate your intersections more safely.
Thank you, Larry.
All right. Well, I guess if there are no other questions in the chat, I will go ahead and stop the recording. As always, we'll stay on the line for a few minutes in case there's any other questions that come on. But thank you, everyone, for attending. This concludes the webinar.